Welcome to Room 101 at Harrigan Compound West. It's story time. So this week, I'm trying out for about the third or fourth time some Baren Latakia Flake. I've come to realize that every blend that I love has a fair amount of Latakia in it. And Latakia is one of those things that you either love it or you hate it. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of middle ground. But I'm drifting ever more towards blends that push that Latakia further and further out front. And this is a pretty nice example, actually. This is one that I think I would tell somebody who's not familiar with Latakias to try first. It's not terribly overbearing, and yet the Latakia flavor is omnipresent. It's really quite enjoyable. Maybe as a more of a morning smoker, when your mind is on something else, this isn't terribly complex, and yet it's very, very good. So give it a shot. We'll see if I've got anything left to say about this as we go. But today I wanted to talk about international things and international things surrounded by the concept of money. It's something that everybody thinks about, but we don't talk about all that much. And I've got a couple of favorite stories here. And probably my all-time favorite begins thusly. I was wandering around in Istanbul one afternoon. Something you don't get to say very often, but there I was. And I was there because that was my way station on my way back from home. I went from the U.S. to Istanbul, from Istanbul to where I lived in Iraq. And every time I ended up in Istanbul, I always gave myself a couple of days because it was really the greatest city I've ever seen. And if you ever have the chance, and it's looking like it's a little dicier now to travel there, but if you ever have the chance, you owe it to yourself to maybe give it some real consideration, because that city is where East and West meet, and it's where ancient and modern come together. That city has everything connected to it. And if you go there looking for that, you will in fact find it. And it's a beautifully sublime kind of place. I preferred being there alone. So I was outside walking around, and I looked up. There were 4 or 5 guys who I knew in Istanbul, and they're all guys who worked at the university in Iraq with me. And we quickly decided that we would go have dinner. Why not, right? And we picked up another stray along the way, and there we all were, guys who had all gone to other places, because, when you get a week or two off, you're not going to stick around Iraq. You want to go somewhere and maybe cut loose a little bit, have some fun. Anyway, we got to this beautiful restaurant. We walked up 3 flights of stairs to the top floor. And from the balcony, you could see the Bosphorus from where we were sitting. It was really something. In the distance, the Blue Mosque, the Hagia Sophia. Wow, right? And we're just eating on top of the world. It's one of the all-time great nights. Until the waiter came over, and he asked if we would want anything else. We said, no, we'll settle up now. And he walked away, and we all looked at each other, and it occurred to us that none of us had Turkish currency on us, not a dime. And we figured this is going to cause a problem of some kind. So we called the guy over and said, look, man, we don't have any Turkish money. And this is how you know the Turks have been merchants forever. He said, so what do you have? And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And we all emptied our pockets onto the table in front of us. Me, I had dollars. Another person had won. Some guy had rubles. There were a couple of guys had euro, and somebody had Canadian. And the waiter got himself out one of the solar-powered calculators that everybody has sitting around the house and started punching in numbers, and he would walk up and he would take what he wanted from the pile that you had in front of you and move on to the next person. He was so adept at it, you could tell that he did this literally every day, all the time. And we're all feeling a lot better because we felt like we were about to have a problem here, and we didn't want to cause him any grief. By the time he got to the one guy who had put Iraqi money out in front of him, he laughed. He looked at it and said, get that out of here. And the guy said, why? And he said, because that's not money. You can't spend that anywhere. Turns out Iraqi dinar was only good in Iraq. Every other currency was perfectly acceptable in Turkey. Iraq is a bordering country, for crying out loud. You'd think it would work no problem. But it doesn't. And that story kind of stuck with me. I don't know why, but I could never really shake it. And, you go about your life and certain other things happen. And okay, money. So I'm driving to the airport. I lived in Utah at the time, and the airport was about an hour and 45 minutes away. And I've got a flight to Poland, which I'm going to get on real soon after I get there. And the window of time is closing. I only have so long to get to an international flight before they won't let me in the building. And at the moment I realized I had like 45 minutes, an hour left, which is going to be plenty of time, I also realized that, like an idiot, I hadn't gotten any money before I decided to go. I've got like 35 US dollars in my pocket and an international week and a half vacation unfolding right before me. I thought, wow, I'm kind of screwed here. And it turns out I wasn't, not even a little. I got to the airport. I didn't have time to turn around and pick up anything. I don't carry an ATM card. Usually, although I did have one in my wallet, I hadn't thought about it for a year. And I get on the plane and off we go to Poland. And I'm going to Poland, incidentally, to see the one true band, Marillion. You should all listen all the time. And they've got a weekend, and I'm going to listen to 3 concerts. I'm going to hang out with old friends, new friends, et cetera, all of which is fine. But I got there. I landed in Poland. I don't speak a lick of Polish, not one word. And then the miracles started happening. I got out into the concourse, and I opened my cell phone, and I have Google Fi, and it fired up and said, "Great for you. You're in Poland. Your phone works." And I thought, that's handy, because now I can go and get an Uber. And the addresses in Poland have so many consonants in them, I don't even know how they're to be pronounced. All I had to do was type it in. And a guy came, and I got in his car, and we drove away. He tried speaking to me in Turkish. I responded in English, and we both laughed, realizing we were never going to be able to speak to each other. But I had already given him all the information he needed. And after I got set up in an Airbnb, again, without exchanging a single word with the host, I made my way through town, and I found an ATM, and I looked through my wallet. I found an ATM card. And don't you know, I put it in, and it spat out Polish money at me, which worked for the rest of my time there. And all that's kind of strange if you've ever traveled before these things were put in place. But Poland was actually quite a lovely time. But probably the most ridiculous money story I've got was from the day I went out in Iraq to buy groceries, the first day I was in country. So I look in my wallet. I have 3 crisp $100 bills from the United States. That's the sum total of the money I showed up with. I had more, but the airlines progressively throughout the trip stole it from me with over poundage on my bags. They said that I would have to pay them more. And I'm all the way down to $300. And I figured, well, that's enough. I'll get paid before this becomes an issue. But grocery is going to be a problem. So I got into a cab. And how do you tell the dude in the cab you want to go to the grocery store? So a lot of pantomime ensued. And we end up at the grocery store. And I walk up and I hold up the bill, asking by my body language, is this going to be acceptable as payment? And the woman nodded her head. So I went and I picked up all the stuff. I got a little cart and filled it up with all kinds of stuff. Got there, handed her the 100, and she was doing the transaction on that same solar-powered calculator that the waiter in Istanbul had used. Right. So this is just how we do things here. There were no cash registers per se. There was just a cash drawer, and she was adding it all up. And I handed her the 100 at the end, and she took the 100 out of my hand and handed it to a little boy who was sitting on the floor next to her. The little boy promptly got up and ran out the front door. And I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me. I've been here for 3 hours and I'm already being robbed blind on groceries. But it wasn't that at all, of course. People don't behave that way, not even there. What was it? He was going to a place to get more change than they had in the drawer, because I could pay in US dollars, but the change I would get back was always in Iraqi dinar. Because the merchants there knew, and they knew good and well, that US dollars were far more stable as a currency than the dinar was. And the little boy came back with a gigantic pile of worthless money, at which point the woman counted a bunch of things out, handed it back to me, and out the door I went. So what does all this mean? It's interesting when you think about it, because what it really means is that you get a better understanding of what money even is and how it functions when you get away from your comfort zone. I never once thought about money. I never asked the question, what is money? Until I got to study it in college. And you know, we're talking about John Locke's second treatise here, this sort of thing. So you read philosophical underpinnings of what money is and this sort of thing. But in regular life, you don't really think about it until you have to. And you don't really have to until you're very far away from home and you're out of options if the one thing you got doesn't work. And it's amazing how often that one thing really does work. I mean, it's astonishing. Final thoughts on the Baren Latakia Flake. It's a good tobacco. It's very good in a lot of ways. It's not great, but it's very, very good. And if you're looking for that, maybe that first introduction to Latakia, something that won't be so strong that it would put you off, this is a very, very good first try at Latakia. I'm going to keep it around and smoke it at times that I don't want something that's nearly as heavy. And I'm pretty sure that that's going to fit the bill a number of days out there. So not exactly the best tobacco I've ever had, but almost nothing is. Underneath that, it's a very good introduction to a very good kind of tobacco. So enjoy that and enjoy yourselves.
H-A-R-R-I-G-A-N spells Harrigan, proud of all the Irish blood that's in me.
So going to that restaurant in Istanbul was an act of minor defiance in a lot of ways. Iraq was interesting in a lot of ways. But one way it was not interesting was in the food that was served there. It was terrible. It looked terrible. It smelled terrible. It tasted terrible. There was almost nothing good to say about any of it. So whenever you could get out and go someplace else and get real food, that was really something. And I remember to this day sitting at that table with all of the other guys around, and I ordered an eggplant dish, aubergine, as they call it there. And it tasted so much like food, it was overwhelming. Because day after day after day, when you eat things that don't really taste all that good, you lose interest, right? You're just eating to stay alive at that point. But when you can eat for pleasure again, it's really quite outstanding. And that was the most enduring memory I had of Istanbul. I mean, there are a lot of others. But the way that the food looked and smelled when they brought it to the table, the way the breeze blew off the phosphorus into the restaurant, that top floor that we were semi-exposed on, the way you could see at dusk all the lights coming up everywhere. It was one of those perfect moments. You don't get many of them. And you tend not to realize you're in the midst of one until it's done. But at that moment, I sat back in my chair and I knew it was one of the all-time great moments.